Build tips and tricks for Minecraft 1.20.4. Now this won't be easy, and that's not just because I've broken my elbow in 2 places, meaning I only have one hand to make this video, but also because if I'm perfectly honest, there's not that many new blocks. Before you call me crazy, my last video of this style was 3 years ago, and since then we've had this many new blocks added to the game, not including the new snapshot blocks. But for 3 years worth, it's really not that much, considering most of the new blocks just feature some new colors and textures. Now don't get me wrong, it's always great to see some more block variations, but what I'm always most interested in are blocks that offer new mechanics as well as some interesting new shapes. So realistically, we've only got a small handful of new blocks to work with. Before we begin, I'm going to try and capitalize on my injury and ask you to please like this video using your non-dominant hand, and please press that subscribe button. So starting with one of my favorite new blocks, the decorated pot, which obviously is going to be great for just some general decorating. But what's even more interesting is the fact you can pretty much combine the pot with almost any other block, making this my absolute favorite new way of creating flower pots. So just by placing a smaller pot on top, you can make tons of different combinations. Now some of these designs do require commands because obviously you can't just place a full-sized azalea on top of a pot, but either way it's still possible in creative mode, and they're just perfect for decorating. Of course, you can also hang the pots with chains, which does give us some extra options when decorating a ceiling. You can even add a flower pot or even use them as some kind of larger sized lantern. Another thing you can do is connect the pot to some light blue stained glass to create a water faucet, which also looks quite good, and there are many different ways of putting this together. You can either use bamboo or make it seem like this barrel is being emptied, but my absolute favorite design has to be this beautiful water fountain. It honestly took me such a long time to do with a broken arm. It has, a lot of detail. Just place some stair blocks following this shape and the rest should pretty much be easy to follow. You could also potentially use the pot as guidance for a small storage unit. Not the best idea in the world, but you can store gems, weapons, potions and so on using the corresponding pot design. And speaking of designs, here's an interesting one using the pot with the flame pattern to create a campfire lamppost. Of course you could use a redstone lamp, but I much prefer the fire animation for a more medieval fantasy style. And here we have another really simple design that just works, a small medieval well tied up using leads on both sides, and just scatter a couple of pot shards for detail and you're pretty much good to go. Now then, there are also a bunch of other ways you can use the pot for building. I've just been doing as much experimenting as I could manage, and you could potentially use the pot to create all kinds of fencing, strange wall designs and even pillars. I found that mangrove wood seems to be the best pick. It just matches perfectly with the pot. So much so that we can now finally create a fancy looking totem pole. Gone are the days of, whoever attempted this monstrosity. Then we have someone in the comments complaining about waste of shulker boxes. I'm getting off track, but here's the main issue. We are now reaching my area of concern, and as much as I would love to use the pot for exterior builds, potentially creating something like a chimney or other fancy builds, unfortunately the pot works just like an entity, which means that just after a short distance, the pots start to disappear, making your build look like absolute trash. And considering the scale of some of my projects, I highly doubt I'll be using them for anything other than just some standard decorating. Now I totally understand that this was mainly done for performance reasons, but that does not mean I'm not allowed to hate it, because I very much do, especially considering the pot is such a versatile block. But either way, there's not much we can do about it other than increase the simulation render distance as much as possible. So next up we have the new hanging sign. I don't think I need to state the obvious, but this is just going to be perfect for the entrance of any kind of shop or tavern. A better version of this would be to build a wooden directions pole, which I think is actually called a finger post sign, but regardless, it's a very simple build that might just help players explore your Minecraft world. Another not so practical use is to build a ladder. Here's one just hanging from a hot air balloon, but if you're on creative mode, I would still recommend using barrier blocks to place a real ladder instead, or just use some trapdoors. You could even create a broken down suspension bridge, which is a really cool idea. This design was actually based on this Reddit post, so credit goes to ChopTop84. Another really simple design is to build a very teeny bridge to help cross a small pond. Just place some stair blocks side by side and make sure to push a grass block into the armor stand to attach it to the bridge for some extra detail. Now this next design is one of my favorites, but be warned, it is a pretty gruesome one that brings us all the way back to the days of that torture dungeon we built a few years ago. To put it simply, I built a guillotine. I just had a bit of a random big brain moment and decided to use random symbols on my keyboard to create what looks like blood dripping all over the place. I don't think you need a tutorial to build this, but just in case, here's a quick time lapse for you to follow. So next up we have another really simple design, just a bench hanging from a tree. Not much else to say about this, but it's definitely much better than some of the older designs we've used in the past. Now of course, I'm sure there are plenty of other interesting ways of using the new sign, with plenty of different designs to come up with, but I don't want to, bore you with the obvious stuff like fencing or, I don't know, a simple table. I'm trying to find the best designs possible, and I'm really trying here. Please subscribe. So with that out the way, I don't think any of these other designs are really going to blow your mind, so I think it's time we take a look at some of the other blocks on this list. One new addition which I found quite interesting was the pitcher plant. At first, I thought it was just this flower, but apparently if you plant the seed on some farmland, you also get this weird block. So what you could do is use them to elaborate on some of your farmland. All you have to do is prevent them from growing by either using commands, barrier blocks, or maybe just some string, because honestly they do look like a bunch of giant turnips, and yeah, they just look really interesting. Here we have another very simple design that honestly looks pretty good, just some bamboo tiki torches using candles. You can also attach a lead for some extra detail. I've also seen a few people using the new bamboo raft as some kind of storage unit. Not sure if I like the idea, but if it sparks your interest, I guess you can now make stacks of bamboo. Now the Sculk vein is also quite interesting. You could potentially use them as a new kind of carpet design. All you have to do is mix and match the different blocks underneath to create all kinds of different designs. Honestly, just the different combinations of textures are going to be pretty crazy for all kinds of build combinations. They especially look quite interesting on blocks that glow. Now as for the new Chiselled Bookshelf, I couldn't really come up with any genius designs aside from the obvious secret redstone entrance or just some basic decorating. You could use them as a new floor design and potentially make some interesting wall combinations, but aside from that, it's just a new textured block. But at the very least, here's a simple bookshelf design to help you fill up those empty looking interiors. By the way, I came across this by complete accident, but apparently if you place a piglin head on some redstone, the ears start to flap. Yeah, I did not know about this, but guys, at this point, it's about as much as I could handle with a broken arm. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.